Welcome to Beyond the Business Card podcast.
The one message that was given to me was don't do drugs, don't die. I took a backpack of DVDs and like 80 pounds thinking that would do me. And it was a struggle. The whole dream of being an idealistic journalist is not real. There are very few people that get that chance to have an open, an open channel to tell real stories. And this was the same problem like journalists in the BBC and stuff were having. They wanted, journalists were like, we're going to go into Syria to find out what the truth is on the ground. And the BBC and stuff have been like, yeah, cool, we can't insure you there. Like, you don't belong to us. Almost like we're going to disavow you as if you were an agent.
Joe Lipscombe had no revenue, no staff, and a newborn baby at home. But he still walked away from a safe career to build something the industry had never seen. This isn't just PR, it's Joe's rebellion.
It's shocking. So the dream died. And I still have a huge love for journalism. The dream died because I wasn't in a position to affect change, right? Like any stories that really meant something got pulled off the shelves. We were pulled off the shelves in one market or another every week.
Hi guys, and welcome back to Beyond the Business Card podcast with me, your host, Justin Maguire. And today we have a very special guest. Today we have Joe Lipscombe. Joe is partner and head of MENA operations for the Romans. Now, I want to take a different slant today because Joe, rather than set up his own business, has become a partner in a global PR agency. I don't think they'd like me calling them agency. A dynamic PR, creative. What should I call them, Joe?
You can call us an agency.
I can call you an agency. Okay, we'll stop that. My point is that it's going to be a really interesting show because Joe's going to tell us why he's made that move. We're going to hear about his career. We're going to hear about his move to Dubai. And we're also going to find out his roots back in the UK, where this all started, what led him to get into journalism. I can't wait to unpack the story and I hope you enjoy it. Joe, welcome.
Thanks, mate.
How you doing?
Yeah, good. And can I just say, it's an honor to be the first white male to speak on a podcast.
I wish that was.
I'm joking. That's it. That's the only one I'm going to do. That's the only one I'm going to do. No, it's really cool. And welcome. Can I say that we are recording from Romans HQ?
Yes, we are in Romans MENA HQ. No, it's a beautiful space, mate. And thank you very much for letting us rock up here.
Anytime.
And it looks wonderful on camera. So that's a treat for all the viewers. Now, I don't know if you've listened or watched some of our episodes before. I think you have.
Yes, yeah. I have.
Wonderful. So you'll know that we go through the journey. But what I'd like to do first of all is just give us an intro because I never do it justice. Just tell us about yourself and tell us what you do.
Okay, so I'll make sure that I leave some questions for you. So I'm Joe. I run the Romans. The Romans is an independent creative PR agency. 10 years old this year, 2 years old technically in the MENA region this year. I come from a career of creative and strategy and previously as a journalist. So I trained as a journalist in the UK. I moved into the region during the Arab Spring. Obviously, we can talk all about that. And then at some point, I'd always been involved in craft and documentary making. I was really, a writer, an author, these kind of things was always fascinating to me. And then that's how I found my way into WPP in Ogilvy as a content and creative guy, and then kind of developed from there. And then at the beginning of last year, the opportunity to sort of relaunch and lead the Romans in the region popped up, and didn't feel like the right time at all. It was terrible timing. We can go into that. But one of those opportunities that does not come around very often, if ever at all. And here we are.
Okay.
And that's it.
So that is a thick English accent you have there. Oh. So just tell us about where do you come from back in the UK then?
So I am proudly an Essex boy. My family are all from the East End. I was raised in Essex, between Chelmsford and Braintree and Stansted. People tend to know like Stansted because of the airport, cheap flights into Europe. Well, back then, crikey, not so much these days.
It was either Luton or Stansted you'd go from.
Yeah.
If you were on a
you could get exactly. You could go to Stansted any day of the week and fly to like places you could pronounce for like £9. Like what a great strategy for a holiday. But it's not the same anymore. Like it's really expensive now. But I grew up in there, which always confuses people because I think when you think of Essex, you anticipate a particular type of accent.
Core blimey governor.
Absolutely. Either, like Cockney that then, which like my father still very much has, blending into the sort of Guy Ritchie, and then I just grew up with this quite by chance. So I'm pleased about that. I very much like in touch with my working class socialist roots, but like I thank my lucky stars that I just have good enunciation.
And are your family, were they all based, did they ever leave Essex? Were they international travelers? What made, I'm curious to know, we're sat here in Dubai. Tell me a bit about what that was like at home.
No, we drove every vacation because we were too scared and too tight to fly. So we did the 5 a.m. to Dover, over to Calais, and then, straight through the middle of France. Sometimes we'd reach Italy or Spain. That's what we did. It was great. I loved it. Like with that first time you pull over like a roadside service station in France, and like everything's different, and like the chips are bigger and different flavors, and like the cheese has weird names. Like, yeah, that was us. So no, we didn't travel much at all. My father comes from Walthamstow. My mum not far away. They met in the Dog and Duck. It's a classic East End story. And they're just hard-working, regular people. We found our way into Essex back at a time when they had like thick sort of East country accents, which is funny because now it's just like a spillover of London, right? But at the time, like my dad would be kicked out of country pubs, and he sort of like wouldn't want his type there. So we were raised there, fairly normal, not the nicest part of Essex, not the most opulent, not the most academic, but plenty of fun for a couple of lads, lots of football and jumpers for goalposts, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Very basic, yeah.
I am, so my mum's from Upminster, actually. My mum's from Essex.
Oh, great.
And when I got my first job in London, I lived in Walthamstow.
Yeah.
It's the only place my flatmate had his car stolen and didn't have an engine in it, which I think is a phenomenal feat. We woke up in the morning and it had gone without an engine in it. I mean, how they did that without anyone noticing as well is amazing. Actually, it's very gentrified now, though. It's lovely. It's lovely.
Isn't that the way things go? Yeah, it's the place to be. I mean, the Romans HQ is in Shoreditch, and that whole area is like that now. Like, it's the cool place to be. But it was changing at the time, when I was growing up, and it wasn't a great place to be. The one thing that was loved about it was the old dog track. Do you remember the old dog track? Yeah, that's obviously made way to housing now, as all good things do. But it was kind of famous for that, I guess.
And the nightclub underneath it was quite famous.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that at the time, sadly. But yeah. But it was fine. It was fun. I mean, I'd say the challenge that, with the town I came from was it didn't have a university and it didn't have any industry. So you were either there and commuting into London, or you were there all the time. So, the job centre was opposite the Wetherspoons.
Right.
That was the busiest part of town on any given day. There wasn't a lot of ambition, wasn't a lot of movement, like the council tried. I think they tried to create like a sort of European cafe vibe, and it just got sort of ransacked and, graffitied and stuff. Like, it was that kind of town, like not a lot of local pride. So that, I think that was the sort of probably the tone of my childhood.
So did you go to private school?
No.
Okay. So where do you think the accent came from? Because it's the least Essex accent I've
appeared.
ever heard.
Just
appeared.
Yeah, and no one believes me.
Wow. Okay. And does your brother have an accent?
No, he's a bit more like geese.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know why. Anyone I went to school with is the same. Apart from one friend. I had one friend called Vinny who was in our group, and he was exactly the same. Family from London, raised in that town, and he just had a really standard sort of Queen's English accent. Can you still say Queen's English? Do you have to say King's English now?
I think queer people know what you
Queen's
mean.
English, yeah. BBC English.
Yeah.
And I don't know. And the funny thing is, when I'm here, I almost have to, I try to downplay it because I think people make an assumption that I'm, maybe I fly the blue flag and went to private school, which couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah. I mean, I went to private school, but it was quite an interesting experience because we were brought up by my mum, and my mum was on benefits, but I went to a private school because I was good at sport, right? So how about that? That was a real sort of wake up call. I'd rock up and there would be, people being dropped off in Rolls Royce and Bentley, and I had to walk to school because, my mum had this clapped out Renault 5, right? And when she'd rock up, I was so embarrassed. But, I think it actually did me loads of good, and particularly for business, and gave me a sort of good sense of ambition.
Sure.
What was schooling like where you were? Was it pretty rough?
Yeah, I mean, it was okay. I mean, that's not an interesting part of the story. I was a little shit in school. I was never a bad person. I didn't do anything like illegal or like crimes, like really break any serious rules. The funniest thing was, so for years here, I worked with GEMS Education. And that fascinated me because you go and meet those kids and they are just like, they're in another world compared to where like we were when we were younger. And I said to the CEO, I was like, the funniest thing about it is that you're talking to 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, and 10-year-olds about like global entrepreneurship competitions. The one message that was given to me was, don't do drugs, don't die. That was like the rule for the school. It was like, please, when you're on property, 2 things, if you could avoid, is just don't do drugs and don't die. And that was it. Like that was the height of the ambition for me. Because I think there's a fundamental flaw in the public schooling sector in the UK. I can't speak for other parts of the world. I'm sure it's consistent. The focus and the onus was always on like the higher achieving kids academically. And there wasn't enough money or time or focus or energy on, I think, the kids that really needed it. I was just lost. I was the one, I mean, you probably met 1,000 of them. I was the one where, all of the reports would be the same. Joe's like quite a smart guy. He just doesn't apply himself. Like I was too distracted. I just wanted to make people laugh. I just wanted to get the attention of girls. And I just wanted to go and play football. And that was it. Like I couldn't care about anything less. And I went through a couple of years where I was in detention all the time, but it was for really silly stuff, like just having the last word, like talking back to a teacher, just really stupid stuff. And there was a time around year 9, which I guess would have been like 13, 14, 13 years, where it could have gone the other way. Like that was the time where people started to experiment with drugs and people started doing proper crimes, like breaking into cars and that. And there was a big group in my school, like staying out overnight and, smashing bottles and getting into quite serious fights. And it could have gone. Right. There were like 1 or 2 moments where it could have gone. And I am so fortunate. I think about this quite a lot, having young children and a family now. There were moments where I don't know if they were conscious choices, but I could have easily maybe gone one step too far, and like, who knows? Like I got people there that were friends of mine at the time who were like, where are they? Like they're nowhere, and it could have come down to those poor choices. So I don't think that was maybe a conscious decision from me. I like to think it was, my parents weren't academic, they weren't business owners, and I think when you're when you're working class and you're in the lower classes, I feel like parents don't feel as though they can question teachers a lot, and they aren't as confident to like set the right example. I feel like they're a bit more passive, and research has shown this, right? Like if you go to expensive schools, it's also always like the wealthier families and the wealthier parents who will question like the teacher's authority. The lower classes parents, like they won't. Like if you come to me and say that my kid is not doing so well, the lower class and parents are more likely to be like, sorry, like sorry about that. Whereas the higher classes are much more likely to be like, well, this is obviously this is a problem that you've got to fit. Like my kid would never, So I was always kind of in that world. And I just think they installed really strong values in me from the very beginning, which obviously stuck. And, I don't consider myself to have many fantastic attributes, but I do believe that I've always had a very strong moral core. So I was always able to like resist crime and, things that could have derailed my life, even though I was around those people. And then in year 10, this was the moment. In year 10, I was friends with a guy called James, who was mental. He always had one, right? He was nuts. And he was a ton of fun. We had loads of fun together. It was like the time of CKY and Jackass, so we were like, doing stunts and all this kind of stuff. And they couldn't stop us from disrupting. So what they did is they split us up and they put me into the highest English class to get me away from him. And there was an Irish teacher there called Mr. O'Brien. And he was my Dead Poet Society moment. Like, he was an Arsenal fan, so he used to make a lot of fun of me as a United fan. He'd like leave pictures of like crying United players like on my chair and stuff like that. But he was just the guy who I think saw something and had the patience and I guess the passion to try and bring it out of me. So he took me from being just such a little shit into like a high scoring lit and lang guy. Because I'd always been passionate about writing. I was writing songs, films, like stories as a child. And then it gets to school and like, that's not cool anymore. But, it was always a passion point. And he just worked with me and just got me. I remember him saying to me, he was like, look, you're not structured enough or disciplined enough to be an English major. He's like, but why don't you try journalism? Because you lack structure and you've got an opinion. So he's like, that'd be perfect for you. And I was like, okay, great. And that, funny enough, was like planted the first seed for journalism, which would, ultimately go on to define those years of my life. So I went back to him years later. I went back to see him years later, and I think he'd become sick and either had passed away or was close to, from what I'd heard. I think that's true. And I never got the chance to like really thank him because he was just one of those moments as turnaround. And I think about that all the time. Like that one person that can show someone a little bit of empathy and a little bit of compassion, even when it's difficult. Because I had no interest in being academic and doing well. Like, I just wanted to disrupt and make people laugh. And like those schools didn't know how to handle that. And he did. And he was great. And so he really honed my craft of writing, like long form writing, which is something that I still love to this day. Long form writing is when it's like more than a social caption. You never know these days, do you? Like, people don't know.
I've seen quite a few of your social captions on LinkedIn, though. So you went to university after that, right?
Yes.
Had anyone in your family gone to university before? Right. Okay.
No, I owe everything to my high school sweetheart. She was, we didn't go to the same high school. She lived 25 miles away in a place called Sawbridgeworth, opposite Beckenham Palace.
Right.
We met ice skating in a mutual town. She was from a very leafy, beautiful suburb, old Tudor house, 5-bedroom, golden retriever, 2 cars. Father worked in the city. Boom. They had it all going on. And I'd gone and done an interview in London in my prom suit and used all my pocket money to get from, get the Stansted Express into bank. And I'd gone for this marketing job. I was like, this would be fun. And I went into this interview, and there were a bunch of people around me in like suits and stuff, like their portfolios. And I was like, what is this? And I'd only worked at Tesco previously and a short stint at Burger King. We won't talk about that. And I went in, and like of everyone over the day was sent away, I was still there. And I was like, oh my God, this is me. Like, I'm like, obviously they see something in me. I'm a prodigy. And then the day after, they were like, oh, we're going to call a few of you back. And I went home and I said to my dad, I remember this so vividly. I was like, like, this is an opportunity. And he said to me, it's not what you think it is. I was like, what do you mean it's not what I think it is? Like, it's a marketing job. Like, I can get an office in 6 months. Like, they showed me on the chart. Like, this is it, man. And he was like, it's not, he's like, if anything is this easy, it's not what you think. And I was like, get out, old man. Like, I didn't believe him. And then I went back 2 days later, and the truth came out that what it was a sales gig. It was selling Sky packages.
Oh.
And they'd completely rewritten like, what it was. And I think they'd manipulated these kids. And we got in, and obviously they picked the one. Like, there were people in that room with like degrees and stuff. None of them were in the second round. So they pick, these kids, and they partner you up with someone. And they were like, right, well, we're going to go and like put you all to the test. There was a group of like maybe 15, 16 of us, and went down the elevator. and it was a nice sunny day, and they were like, we're going to go to the underground, and we're going to go to Brixton, and we're going to go to the streets, and we're going to put your marketing to the test. And I didn't have the money to get the underground ticket. I only had a return from Liverpool Street. And I stopped the guy, and I was like, listen, I'm sorry. Like, the crowd kind of went on. I was like, this is really embarrassing, and I'm really sorry, but like, I don't think this is not what I thought it was. And he looked at me and he was like, did you see the ad on like Monster? Like monster.com or whatever, or .co.uk. It's like a job site, right? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, yeah, me too. And it wasn't what I thought it was either. And I was like, oh, no way. I said, but you're still here. And he was like, yeah, like I kind of leaned in, and I've been here about 9 months now. Like I've got an office, like it's all right. And I was like, it's not for me, man. I'm going to walk. I was like, I'm really sorry. I'm going to walk away. I'm really sorry if it embarrasses you. And he was like, it's okay. And then like, there's like a woman like further down. She's like, Jeff, like, fuck it, let's go. And he's like, just a minute. And I walked away, and I remember like sitting on the train home, and I was like teary eyed. Like, I'm a bit sensitive. So I was like teary eyed, and I was thinking about what my dad said. I was like, what am I going to be? Like this, that felt like an opportunity. It felt like a way out. And I'd done film craft and moving image in college the 2 years prior. But like, when I say that was a DOS, that was a DOS. Like the lecturers were like cocaine addicts. So like, it was nuts. So I was really upset, and I took the train back, and had a long conversation with my then girlfriend, and she was like, you can go to uni. And I was like, no, I can't. Like, uni's thousands, it's thousands and thousands. And she was like, no, like it's not like that anymore. Like, you can get grants, and you get loans, and like, you can do it, And I was like, you think? And I took that back to my family, and they were petrified, right? Because all they're thinking is like, dollar signs. And they're like, we don't have the money for this. Like, we don't know anything about it. And I was like, no, like, let me do the research. Like, imagine, like, I could be a university student. And when we thought of university, you're thinking like everything is like Cambridge. Like everything's like Harvard. That's how you see it. Like, it's not like the reality is like crash. You can go and get like a degree in like events management. And so I started like looking it up, and gone like the UCAS site, and like worked out there's like a pointing system and yada yada. And I went to a couple for journalism. I was like, I'll be a journalist. So this is great. And I was really passionate about journalism. I was really passionate about the news because of the Iraqi invasion. This is where it started for me. So I was like, okay, like here's a chance. I go become a journalist as an idealist. Like, I'm going to go and, like report properly, independently, like, on politics and conflict and all those kind of things. And I went to Winchester, and I'd never heard of Winchester. Well, first I went to, funnily enough, went to Greenwich, and I loved Greenwich. But the problem was, like, the university is like, do you know the university campus in Greenwich?
No.
It's where the Maritime Museum is.
Okay.
So like, it's a tourist hotspot as well. Yeah. So like, you don't know who's a student, who's not. And like, at any one point, there's like 1 million like Chinese tourists, and like, it's great, but it was a bit intimidating for me. And I didn't have the confidence. I'm a absolute like 10 out of 10 introvert. So I was like, I couldn't do that. And I went to Winchester, and it's this tiny city in this little hole in the South Downs. And the university was built off the back of the King Alfred School, which is like hundreds of years old. And it's just old and pleasant. And there's like 2,000 students. And I was like, oh my God. And I met the professor, and he is an absolute nutcase. When I say he's a nutcase, like he looked like he'd gone ready for work, like had a shower, gone ready for work, and then been in a car crash, and then walked to work. Like, that's what he looked like. There's like hair everywhere, and there's like huge sweat patches, and like, like bits of blood from like bad shaving. And he'd always be like chewing a wooden stick, and had been sued like 6 times as a journalist, and like sued 3 times, and like written a book on like the Daily Mail. And like he was just nuts, and he was amazing. He was incredible, but I couldn't get in there because I didn't have enough points. So what I did was, do you remember the ICS adverts?
No, don't.
You remember that ICS you can?
Yeah.
No, it'd be like if it was like someone like working in a factory. It'd be like, can I maintain my 9 to 5 and get a degree? I'd be like, ICS you can. And I remember that jingle, and I was like, oh, I can do like a remote like some A levels to boost my scores. ICS you can. So I looked it up. So I had to work 6 days a week in Tesco, and then come home after like 10-hour shifts and do like an English language A level to boost my points. And that was like hell on earth because there's no teacher and you're working like 10 hours in a supermarket in Essex and then like coming home and like eating like whatever dinner like mum had put on, usually a shepherd's pie, always a shepherd's pie. And then like, like writing essays and you had no idea if you were right or wrong, good or bad. And it was so funny. At that time, my mum she works in emergency response in Uttlesford, which covers like all of Stansted and Epping, like the east end of London. And she's worked in that field for years.
So
like,
someone calls 999, they get you off.
No. So she works for emergency response planning in the council. So like if the president visits, like she sets the whole thing up. And like when 2012 happened, like and the Olympic torch runs died there, like she sets the whole thing up. If there's like storms or natural disasters, she makes sure that like people have sandbags at their doors, right? Like all like emergency planning for the district. And because it includes Stansted, it's really awesome because all heads of state come through Stansted because of the direct route access into London and because everyone else will like hover around like City and Heathrow. It's just kind of like a little secret thing. So she's always like, she knew like when the Queen was gonna die because like the procession has to start there. Like she knew all like these kind of like state secrets. We were always convinced that she was a spy. And but she'd been made redundant a week before, and we were a 2-income household. Like we wouldn't have been able to live on a single income, and it was really dark. I remember it being a really dark week because I would come through some really tough times financially when we were younger, and my parents were super resilient, and this had happened, and she was really upset. And then a week went by, and a guy, I remember this so well, a guy called her and was like, "Listen, Lisa, like these redundancies had to happen, but we really love you in the place, and what we're trying to do is we're going to see if we can put you into another position. It would be technically a promotion, it'd be like higher salary. And like, we're not quite, we're trying to make it work because there's a lot of cuts." And she got a call that day that she'd secured that job. And at the exact same time, I got the call to say that my results for the A-level were just high enough to get me into uni. So it's like this double moment of like achievement that was seldom experienced in our family. And it kind of changed everything. So she went on, in that position. That was obviously a very long time ago. I moved to Winchester and that was the moment. That was the moment that changed my life. That enrollment changed my entire outlook on life, who I was, what I wanted to do, everything. I owe everything to probably that moment.
Wow. And do you owe it to the lecturer? This guy who looked like he'd been in a car crash?
Yeah, Chris Horry. You can look him up.
Was he the impact you hoped he would be?
No, it was a combination of things. So it wasn't just going to class. It was the whole environment. Like, it was the people I lived with. It was the academic environment. It was the study groups. It was the different friends. Like, I had friends that were coming from Bath and Somerset, from the north, from old money, from new money, like people that worked and lived on farms, to people whose parents were like artists and they were passionate about their academics and having fun. And funnily enough, at that time, so my then girlfriend who helped me get into uni, we decided to go our separate ways, and like you can just become yourself, So I transformed in terms of like what I was listening to, what I was reading, what I was watching, and this newfound confidence, because there you were allowed. You couldn't do it where I was from. Like I was very much into like the sciences and I liked like my history and these kind of things. Like it just wasn't. No one was doing that where I was from. It just wasn't a thing. Whereas there it was. You could explore it and you could share ideas and you could read and like then you dress up as like a dinosaur and like go get drunk. And it was brilliant. I just loved every day. And Winchester is just a fantastic city. It's so filled with history. It's the capital before London. And it's just a beautiful place because it's so friendly and welcoming. And like it's so like familiar. Like you go out and like you recognize everybody because like the only people that are there are students or like old folks. And so it's just a really safe environment. And I think my introverted self needed that. People were encouraging me, like I was a big cosmology guy. I was a big space guy, a big star, like big planet guy. And like everyone made fun of me, obviously, but like in a fun way, And then Chris and like the journalism course, they were even better because they were complete renegades. They were absolute rebels. Like they would go. So we had a newsroom. So we didn't do a regular course. We were a bit of an experimental course where we built a live TV station, like with a proper mast and everything, like a broadcast station. And you would just have a job on the station, and you would do that for most of the week. And instead of getting paid, you'd get marked. So we were doing real journalism, like video journalism. So like you'd either be like in the gallery, like running the show on the sound desk, or you'd be presenting on the thing, or you'd be out, capturing the stories. And there were probably 3 people that were really good. A lot of good people, but probably 3 that took it really seriously. Had a really good time with it. I was one of them. A friend of mine called Stu, and maybe like 1 or 2 others. And we loved it. Like we were out, like knocking on the doors of councillors and politicians and, like doing stories, like not just on campus, but like, I did a story on like I did a story on a race row once where the girls' hockey club had dressed up as Africans, and they were holding like stuffed monkeys as their children. Super racist. And the girls' hockey club was awful as well. So I was like, let's take these fuckers down, And the African Caribbean Society had found the pictures on Facebook, and obviously heartbroken. Like it was really disgusting. It was like 40 white girls, like all dressed up as like Africans. It was awful. And so like, we went in for that, and the uni put like massive pressure on us to like cut the story. They were like, look, you're one of us. Like, don't do this. But I had like Chris Horry in my head, who was like, take him down. Like his whole thing was like take him down, like beat the man, like go for it. And like he turned us into these like journal machines, and it was great. And so he always wanted us to be on the right side of history, but he was just a fascinating guy. And then every Thursday he would just take a day out to talk about like philosophy and like existentialism and like Nietzsche and Kant and Kubrick, and like because he was just fascinated about it. And he felt that it was imperative to storytelling and craft and thought and independent thought and like all of these things. So every year, I had to sit through this for 4 years. Every year, he would do a stand-up lecture on 2001: A Space Odyssey, where he would pause it like every 3 minutes to then like talk about what was on the screen. And there's a beginning. I don't know if you're a Kubrick fan.
Oh yeah, I know the film. Yeah.
So obviously he's a legend, right? But
is he Full Metal Jacket?
He's Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just like he's one of the goats. Yeah. But 2001 is particularly slow. I love my slow sci-fi. Like, don't get me wrong, but that is particularly slow. But there's like a 5-minute black screen at the start, which is meant to like represent the dawning of time, like nothingness. And he would pause that to explain it. Like it went on for like 5 hours. So that was what he was like. And so that was really fun because he got you interested in, like existentialism and ancient philosophies and political philosophies. And it was so fun. Like he made it so wildly fun. He didn't mean to make it fun. He was nuts. But so that whole environment just like allowed you to kind of like be a bit wacky. And then I leaned into that. I found confidence in being like a bit weird. I really liked that. Whereas like where I'd grown up, it was all about being cool, right? Like you had to have the Air Force Ones, like, like the Nike TNs, or you're going to get stabbed. Whereas here it was like, you could just be wacky. And so I really leaned into that, and I started studying, like I said, like cosmology and physics, and, Brian Cox had just like made it on the scene, and he was like a former like bassist in a rock band, and like now he was like a physicist.
Mrs. McGuire is a huge fan. I
mean,
yeah.
Mr. Lipscombe is a huge fan. It's like, it was great. And, I was like Stephen, I was like a huge Stephen Hawking fan.
Where did that come from?
That interest?
Yeah.
I was just obsessed as a kid. I loved it. Like, just the whole concept, like just the whole concept of the universe just like blew my mind. And yeah, it just developed then. Like, I loved like, like I studied like the origin of species and like Darwinism, like that. I just loved it. I just thought it was fascinating. And then that versus like the church, because I went to a Church of England school, I would like C of E. So like I would have to go to the church every week and like sing hymns, and you never question it. And so then that side became questionable. And so now you're like pitting. Now, obviously you have to remember, this was way before social media. And like these echo chamber algorithms that are just like telling us our opinion on things. Like you had to read and discover your point of view on things. Like, a completely lost art. So, I'd be reading like all this stuff and be like, that doesn't add up to that. And like, well, you can't go online and like crowdsource your opinion on those things like you do today, right? It's like something bad's happening in the world. You're like, how do I feel about that? Let me just look at Twitter, and like 17 tweets will tell you how you feel about it. And you're like, that's my opinion now. Like you had to build that slowly. And so that was happening, and I really enjoyed that. And it just got bigger and bigger. And then the idea of connecting that to broadcast was like mind blowing for me. I was like, well, I'm going to go and make documentaries on this. And, I traveled to CERN and I made a documentary on Sir Patrick Moore. Do you remember Sir Patrick Moore?
Yeah, of course.
I went and stayed like to his house in West Chelsea, and like he was a hero of mine. He's dead now, obviously, but he's
What's
like
the program he did?
The Sky at Night.
Sky at Night.
He was a BAFTA winner for that.
That's it.
BAFTA winner. He was the longest running BBC show in history.
Yeah.
And you know what? He only missed one episode because he had salmonella in like 40 plus years or something. Like if you don't know what that is, like so Patrick Moore was famous when I was a kid because he did Games Master.
Yeah.
Remember? Everyone thought everyone thought he was gay. That was the funny thing at the time, because he used to wear these like really flamboyant like Hawaiian shirts. And he looks a bit like a sort of slug, didn't he? Sort of looked a bit like Jabba the Hutt.
With his monocle. Right?
And he had a monocle, yeah. And the truth was that his wife, his only love when he was like a young teenager, she was an ambulance nurse, and she was bombed and died in the war, and he vowed never to love again. And he lived with his mother in a thatched house in West Chelsea until he was like 90 something. And I mean, she'd obviously died by then. He was there with a Polish like live-in helper. And he wrote 100 books in that house with 2 fingers on a typewriter, because he couldn't type on a keyboard. And the telescope that he used for Sky at Night was in the garden. And he used that telescope to map the dark side of the moon for the Soviets. He'd done crazy things. He was the only man at that time alive who had met the first airman, right, the Wright brothers, the first man in space, Yuri Gagarin, and the first man on the moon, in Neil Armstrong, and had played the fiddle with Albert Einstein. Like he had like like he went into his office, and like there'd be like a BAFTA on the floor, like behind like a Tesco value gym, and then like a picture of him and Einstein, and you'd be like, what is this life? And he was just the most humble, wonderful, incredible man. And it's brilliant. I was like, what is your and like he used to like slur a lot, and the reason was because he lost his teeth because he was shot down as a fighter pilot. He had like the craziest life. And I said to him, like one of the things I said to him, I was like, what's your day to day now? Because he was wheelchair bound at that point. I was like, what's kind of like your day to day been over the last like few decades? And he would say he's like, he talked like this. And he's like, I'd wake up and I'd go down to the local tennis club and play a set of tennis, 6 love, and I'd come home and I'd read the obituaries, and if I wasn't in them, I'd get on with my day. And like that was his whole thing. And I loved him. And so he fascinated me. And I shared a birthday with Stephen Hawking. So I was like, that's my end. So I loved him. And like all these guys were doing these amazing things. And I was like, like, you look at like, oh my God, like you look at a picture of like Jupiter, like up close, you're like, that's amazing. So I was obsessed. So I did my dissertation in cosmology. So I wrote about the origins of time as a concept, which like was really weird because everyone else was doing like the 2010 election, like stuff like that. But I didn't want to go down that route. I was like, let's get nerdy, and so that took me in that kind of whole direction. It was brilliant. What a time.
I could see it had a big impact on you.
Yeah. And so my first real journalism job it was funny. I had to go back to Essex, and I was working 3 days a week as an intern at Sky News in Sloane Lane, 3 days a week in Costa Coffee. And then overnight, I was writing features for a science magazine called The Cosmos of Everything, based in Australia. And they're only awake overnight. So I was working like 24 hours a day, either making coffees at Costa, making coffees at Sky, or like writing about destroyed stars and cosmic nebulae for like $50. And by the time that money reached me in England, it was like $22, So my dad was like, are you going to make any money at any point? And I was like, shut up, Dad. Because when that first byline comes in, that was amazing. It was a story it was about stars that shouldn't exist. It was like a feature on stars. It was like 2-pager in this like in a real magazine. And it was like by Joe Lipscombe. I'm like, oh man, that was great. I'd be like sweeping like baby vomit off the floor at Costa this like shopping center, just like thinking about that byline. It was great. Yeah, that's where it all started. That was amazing.
What was your break in journalism then?
I reported on the 2010 election, and the BBC, one of the producers from Sky saw the coverage and gave me an internship. Corners gave me an internship. He was like, come on down to London, come on down to Sloane Lane. And I'd done a bunch of like local stuff. I'd broken some fairly good political stories. There was a huge student protest that we'd covered, and I made a couple of documentaries. Like we were super active. There's like a few of us. We were super active, pumping out loads of stuff. And that was it. And I went to Sky, and that helped me get those gigs. I had a few like freelancing gigs. And that's when the opportunity to cover the Arab Spring came up.
Mm.
And that's what took me abroad, because I hadn't thought about going abroad. Like, it wasn't a concept. No one in my family had like gone or lived abroad. And I didn't really know anything about Dubai. I didn't know anything about the United Arab Emirates at all.
But were you full-time in Sky? Were you just freelancing?
No, I was interning.
Oh, wow.
I was an intern on the Sunrise desk. Which was amazing because I was so in love with Charlotte Hawkins, and like I would bring her coffee, and then I would prep people in the green room. So I'd like meet celebrities, which was quite fun, and like have like pre-chat with them and stuff like that. And then I was writing stories on the online desk. So I got a couple bylines on the online desk, which was great as well. Like a couple of big stories, because like Sky is all about speed, right? They don't really care about the accuracy. I don't know what it's like today. My feelings on Western media have completely changed. But at that point, it was just like speed. So when like Nelson Mandela died, like things like this, it was just like, get that story out. So like, it was really exciting. It was really exhilarating at the time. But I always felt that I wanted to be in the features world. I wanted to be doing features. I wanted to be doing documentaries. I wanted to be doing stories of substance, because I had my hero at the time, probably still is to a degree, was John Pilger.
Wow.
And John Pilger was really important to me, because he was the one that helped me define like my point of view on, like I said earlier, the Iraqi invasion. That was the pivotal moment for me in journalism, like post 9/11 and the British and American response, and the coverage, like the Western coverage, how the media like rallied the population into like backing that war despite the protests. It was still, I don't know if it's still to this day, but I think it is. The protest in London, the anti-war protest in London then was the biggest in history. Mm. There were over 1 million people in London protesting against that war that Tony Blair took us into.
Yeah.
And, Pilger was countryless. He was like American Australian, and he didn't care, right? Like he spoke out against the Americans, spoke out against the Brits, and he lost, like all his airtime. Like he wasn't being invited onto TV and stuff. Like later in his career, he's like popping up on like Russia Today. So the only ones who would talk to him, and like he really held firm. He was pro-Palestinian, and like he was just super balanced. And I loved how he approached it. And I think he highlighted for me the dangers of like a radical Western press, and I say like radical Western press sounds ridiculous, but like that was the BBC, like ITV, Fox News, CNN, like, doing these like shows on, let's break down the incredible like jet fighters that the American military are going to send into Iraq, like made it all like sensationalized. And it just sparked such this like anti-Arab rhetoric. And there were real hardcore, proper journalists going in, doing the work, and those stories were being suffocated, because they didn't fit the agenda. And I hated it. I hated it. It made me sick. And there was one story in particular, which was the story of Dr. David Kelly. Does that name mean anything to you?
Was he... why does his name mean something? Was he held hostage or something? Well, no.
He was a weapons expert in the Ministry of Defense. And he was the man who basically exposed that the dossier from Number 10 on Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction was faked.
Okay.
Was sexed up was,
Yeah.
was the phrase that was used. He basically was the one who said, look, all of these reports about these potential sites.
Did he die?
He died.
This is it. This is. Oh, sorry. I remember it now. Yeah.
So what happened was he was the one who looked at the report and he was like, no, like there's no potential for weapons of mass destruction in these places that were in the report, and the report was used to justify the invasion, right? He said no. The BBC number 10 got to him. And the BBC got to number 10 and he was supposed to have impunity. And Alistair Campbell leaked his name, who was obviously the spin doctor of Tony Blair at the time. He's redeemed himself exceptionally well. That makes me uncomfortable, but whatever. I guess he's good at his job. He was a spin doctor at the time. He was backing the invasion. The press got to Dr. David Kelly. Dr. David Kelly turned up dead on Harrow Downhill. Young family and a lifetime of service. He turned up dead. And the inquiries on that always turned up like nothing. And so there was like a big controversy about whether or not it was suicide because he was driven to suicide or something more sinister. And they opened up the inquiry again, funny enough, the Levenson inquiry in like 2016, 2017, I think. And again, it was a whitewash. It was the only time the Independent ran a clear front page, just a white front page. And it just said whitewash. Like these guys just weren't held to account for anything. And I spoke to the editor of the BBC who was there at the time. There's an interview on my student YouTube channel with Richard Sandbrook about that. And it was fascinating. So when the chance came to get into the region and meet the people and cover the stories.
So you were covering the stories as an intern in Sky News, right?
No, I wasn't covering those stories. I was doing like beat reporting at that time.
So what got you noticed?
I don't know.
You never found out?
I don't know. Took a chance.
Because you're talking about this and you're very passionate about what you're talking about. And was that obviously was getting you noticed? Were you like that then?
No, I don't. Well, yeah, I think I was passionate, but I was directionless. I didn't know.
Were you gung ho?
An opportunity came up to come out here. I went all in for it. I didn't know what else to do. Like I couldn't keep working at Sky. I couldn't afford to. You've been on a train in the UK, right? Couldn't afford to work at Sky and keep that internship up. I couldn't sustain myself with the magazine work. I had 2 of those jobs. One that was a bit more B2B-ish. Couldn't keep working at Costa Coffee. Oh my God. That was horrible. I'm not cut out for that sort of labor. I'm too lazy. And the opportunity to come here appeared. And I got the gig and I took a chance and I took a backpack of DVDs and like £80 thinking that would do me. And it was a struggle. It was a struggle. But then what happened was Bloomberg wanted to launch Business Week in the region. This was the moment. Bloomberg wanted to launch Business Week. And I loved Business Week. It was a fantastic, fantastic magazine, from the design grade like to the editorial philosophy. It was so brilliant. And because not long like just completed the turnaround in New York, in Lexington, because it was gone to die a death, and Bloomberg bought it out, and they wanted to bring it to the Middle East, and they wanted to tell real stories in the MENA region, and they needed a journalist. And I went in for it, never expecting to get it, and I got it. I got that gig and traveled the region covering these stories, and it was great. It was the in. But the funniest thing about it was like even then there was resistance. Like I had traveled into the region a ton, like uninsured, to cover big stories that they would put in the magazine, but they wouldn't insure me. They wouldn't insure me against like kidnap or, And this was the same problem that like journalists and the BBC and stuff were having. They wanted, like journalists were like, we're going to go into Syria to find out what the truth is on the ground. We want to go into Egypt. We want to go into Lebanon. We want to see, what's happening in Iraq. And the BBC and stuff have been like, yeah, cool. We can't insure you there. Like, you don't belong to us. Like, almost like we're going to disavow you as if you were an agent. So I flew in and, like embedded myself with Save the Children and UNICEF. And I did a ton of stories on the ground. At the time, I was really enjoying like the humanitarian stories. That's why I love the region so much, because whatever you like, I don't really blame people in the West who have a perception of this part of the world, because they are inundated with narrative on what this place is.
Yeah.
Right. They are inundated with like anti-Islamic rhetoric, anti-Arab rhetoric. It's very aggressive. It's worse in America, you know, like you watch that American Sniper movie, the Bradley
Yeah, I
Cooper
have.
one.
Yeah.
Like the outcry from Americans after that was crazy. Like they were like social media posts, like, oh, like just pumped up to go out and shoot some ragheads, you know, like stuff like that. I was like it was such a painfully stupid thing to like way to tell a story. I felt I was angry when I was watching it, but that's a whole other story. But I was going in, I was meeting families, you know, who were living in tents, and like I remember the first time I ever went to a refugee camp, the first time, and I'd met this guy who had 2 teenage sons, and what they'd done is they'd bought 2 of these like plastic kind of mobile homes, you know, it's like small little circle homes, and they ripped them up and they stuck them together and made like a makeshift restaurant in the camp. Because what they were doing is they were getting delivered like kilos of flour, but not everyone knew what to do with that. You just like a big pot of flour. Like, it was me, like I'd be dead, you know, but like here's a pot of flour, I'd be like, cool, like, you know what. And so what they were doing was they were going and buying or trading the flour from people that didn't know how to use it, and then they built like a falafel restaurant in the camp with an old oil barrel that they used to cook the bread. And when I spoke to the guy, his story was he was a banker. He was a senior banker in Damascus, and their house had been bombed, and his family had been moved out, and he'd stayed to fight, and he hadn't lost his leg, but he'd basically lost the ability to walk. Like, and his whole thing wasn't about teaching the kids like how to make money. He was teaching them how to be sustainable business owners. He was like, you'll go back one day. Like this will be done and you'll go back, and you need to know how to help rebuild your country. And it was just like that resilience was just mind blowing for me, you know, because I grew up working class in a place that was a bit rough, and you think, oh, I've got it hard, you know, and then you see that and you're like, my word. So the resilience and the way that people just carry on, and those stories, and they're just real people, you know, they're good people. And I just, like, when you have the chance to tell those stories, that was what I wanted to do. The problem was it got harder and harder to do that. You know, like telling their stories properly got really hard. The whole dream of being an idealistic journalist is not real. There are very few people that get that chance to have an open, you know, like an open channel to tell real stories. And you've seen it now. I mean, look at the coverage from the West around Palestine. It's shocking. So the dream died, and I still have a huge love for journalism. You know, but the dream died because I wasn't in a position to affect change, right? Like any stories that really meant something got pulled off the shelves. And we were pulled off the shelves in one market or another every week. And, you know, like and it got to the point where it was just a commercial job, right? Like I was going to interviews with a commercial person. You know, I'd be like, oh, I'm going to interview this guy. They'd be like, take the commercial guy. I'm like, what? Like, you know, it's like try and sell an ad. So it just became a business. So that was why I stopped. Because you end up becoming sales people.
Were you approached by communications companies at the time, or were you?
I had a conversation with one.
Did you go looking?
No. I tell you what happened, because it's a funny story. I was freelancing. In bits and pieces, and I was helping make a documentary with a friend. He was doing a documentary on the plight of pangolins. Who are being poached, they were endangered. And I was a big wildlife guy as well, so I was really into that. And a friend of mine now works in New York. He contacted me from an agency, and he was like, look, we've got a launch this week. It was Nissan Juke. We've got a launch at the Autodrome. It's cool. It's going to be like free drinks, like music. It's cool. Need some journalists there. Do you mind coming down? I was like, of course, man. Like, no worries. So I go down. And he's like, I want you to meet my boss. And I was like, okay. And this guy comes around the corner, drunk, and I'd been in an interview that day and had a tie on, and he had like one arm over one girl, one over the other, and like they worked for him. It wasn't sinister, and he was like a bit soppy, and he was like, and he looked at them both, and they knew me, and he looked at them, and he was like, guys, what do you think of this? Like, what would you say about this guy? Like, gun to your head. And I think one of them said something like, yeah, Joe's a smart guy, probably tricky to manage. like something like that. And I was like, thanks. What is this? And he looked at me and he was like, I got a job for you. He's like, come to my office on Monday. Don't wear a fucking tie. And just like walked off. And I was like, what the hell was that? And I was eating eggs exclusively. And I was like, I'd like couldn't pay my bills. And I was like, right, I should go and do this thing. And so I went to the office on the Monday and I was like, oh, what am I doing? Like going to like a PR agency like that. And I walked in and I thought I was better than everyone. Obviously, I was a journalist. That's what you think. And I didn't know what agency was. All I knew was the media relations. That's all I knew. I didn't know what an agency did. I knew nothing about I didn't know what Cannes was. Like I didn't know anything. And I walked in. It was really cool. I was like, this is good. And I was looking around. I couldn't see this guy. And this woman came out to me and she was like, can I help you? And I was a bit miffed because my dad was traveling for like 4 days and I'd left him to go on this interview. And I was like, yeah, I'm supposed to be like having an interview with Sammy. And she was like, Sammy's on vacation. And I was like, son of a. And she was like, can I help you? And in like my tiffiness, I was like, I don't know, can you? Like awfully, like I was awful. And she was like, well, I'm the president. And I was like, oh, sorry. She's like, I know why you're here as well. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I went in and spoke to her. And that was Sada Hamad. She was the president PR team, like, very, very well respected and well known in the industry. And I spoke to her for like 2 hours. And the vision was they wanted to build a creative desk inside the PR agency. And they felt they were going to be the first to do it in the region. And they wanted to get a journalist who was like a tough, idealistic journalist because they thought who better to sell stories and features and videos and ideas to journalists than like one of their own. That was the concept. And they sold it to me. And I was like, yeah, sounds great. And so I came in a completely brand new position made for me. And they asked me to learn the business from an arm's length. My boss, Sammy, like dear mentor and friend, Sammy Matrom, he was like, just learn from an arm's length. He's like, don't get sucked into the way we do things because you'll become one of us and we don't need that. Like, that's not where your value is. So just like hold back and don't do things the way we do them. We need you to help influence change. And I was like, oh, okay, fine. And so I did that and I sort of fumbled my way through that first year. And then I just fell in love with the agency environment. I loved it. And I think it's for some people, it's not for others, but I loved it.
What did you love about it? What did you love about it?
I loved, like, firstly, like you come out of newsrooms. Newsrooms are tough, right? They're tough. They're a tough environment. There's a lot of ego. There's a lot of tough criticism, daily criticism, right? Like you're having like 3-4 stories a day, maybe criticized. And I've had like stories screwed up and thrown at me, like all this kind of stuff. So the environment was much more laid back. But I loved like the range of people and the range of projects, like going from like room to room and like brainstorming things and coming up with new ideas. And like, I was in such a fun position because I wasn't client servicing. I was just like, they were like, go to Joe. You need an idea? Like, they're like, go to Joe. Like, need something like written a little bit differently? Like, go to Joe. I just suddenly fighting my whole time in newsrooms to be noticed, found myself in a position where like all those skills were really valued in that environment. So I was like, great. So I loved it. And I got to hone my craft and try new things. And we were doing video scripts and then we were doing animations and then we were building campaigns. And I loved it. And all the stories I really wanted to tell, this is going to sound strange, but like all the stories I really wanted to tell in journalism, I could in an agency, which seems like sort of paradoxical. But, we were telling stories, like really good purpose-driven stories and in really interesting ways because like businesses and clients had money to do it properly, like they were trialing podcasts at the time or video documentaries. And yeah, it wasn't completely neutral because you're always doing it on behalf of like a brand or something, but there was enough meat there to like hone your craft and grow skills. And I was directing and I was writing and I was filming and I loved it. Just loved it. And then everyone would like go out and have beers. It's great.
And so this was with WPP, so people have got context, right? So
that was Ogilvy,
yeah.
Yeah.
And you stayed with them a long time.
Nearly a decade, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's not many people that stay in an agency for 10 years.
Nope.
Why?
I But I'm loyal to a fault, firstly. And when I feel a part of something, like I'm in it, like I wanted to beat all our competitors. I didn't want to join them. I wanted to win Agency of the Year every year. I wanted to win the big pitches. And then I felt that the brand became me a bit. I felt like I was one of those guys, like few people get to enjoy that feeling. And I think I was lucky. I had good bosses who put me forward, put me in the right rooms, gave me opportunities, let me lead big pitches, and put me on stage and put me in the papers. And I felt as though I felt like I owed them my allegiance a little bit. And I was never going to go to a competitor. I wasn't going to go to another network. I do think today that a lot of that was misguided. I think once you get out and you look back, you realize how they play it. I didn't realize that at the time. And I think when I left, one of the first things I felt was, why didn't I go sooner? But I don't have any regrets because I wouldn't have left I was happy. I wouldn't have left if it wasn't the Romans. It could only be the Romans. That opportunity was the only one.
You mentioned that Sammy was a mentor to you in the early stage. What did he bring to the table that you didn't have at the time?
He's a fantastic people manager. He knew he wasn't as creative as me. He couldn't write as well as me, and he couldn't strategize as well as me. What he was really, really good was empowering you. He was so egoless. He was so good at putting himself at the back of the room, which is really surprising, given, you'd never know, Sammy's background, and the family he was from and stuff. You wouldn't know from meeting him. He's such a humble person. And, his father was the owner of the business, but you wouldn't know it. And he was really good. He just stood behind me. And one other, I had a partner there in more of the business and client side, and he stood behind me. And for 6-7 years, he just pushed me forward. I've got this idea, he's like, go. I was like, I want to talk to the global team. He's like, go. I was like, I'd love to go and present this to New York. He's like, do it. He was just that guy. And if it fell back, he'd be like, fuck it. He's like, try it again. I'd walk into his office 3-4 times a week. I'd burst the door open and be like, Sammy, I was like, listen to this. Just listen. Hear me out. And tell him this ridiculous idea. And he'd be like, do it. Go for it. Let me know how it lands. And I just loved it. He was perfect for me. He was perfect for me. He wasn't perfect. He was perfect for me. Because he knew that I think on the surface, I could come across as, I think my entire life, people have completely, I think, misinterpreted and misunderstood me. I think they see me as arrogant. I think they see me as cocky. He knew that it was all a cover for my own insecurities and introvertedness. I just wanted to do really cool stuff. I wanted to do the best work. I wanted to be the best writer. And he just knew how to manage me. He was like a calming force. He was, an arm over the shoulder. I was that sort of, I use the Sir Alex Ferguson example, he knew who to berate and who to, and who to put an arm around the shoulder. And I was one of those players. I needed the reassurance. I needed the sensitive tone, and he just played it perfectly. And I think he got the best out of me. And I think he knew that. And so when he left, it was a different environment, and I suddenly had to find my way, with other bosses, because I knew I was unique in terms of how you could manage me. And Sammy was just so good at it. So I always feared when he would go, I'd be exposed. Someone else would come in with a different style and be like, I don't need that. Who's this guy? I don't need him. So I was always a bit nervous about that. But I was lucky. I had really good bosses after that. So really, really good people. Yeah. And he's been a mentor ever since. I mean, when the Romans came knocking and they were like, want you to throw your hat in the ring to lead this thing, I called him straight away, because I was like, I don't know anything about business. I have a vision for what a great agency should look like. That's what I had. I knew what a great agency should look like. I had a feeling that I was always more or less on the right side of things internally. I was like, I always wanted it to be about the people. I always wanted it to be about the work, and I was surrounded by people that always wanted it to be about profit and revenue at any cost, right? I'd seen like junior people cry in meetings because their seniors wouldn't defend them in front of a high-paying client. I'd seen good ideas get kiboshed for efficiencies. I'd seen people leave and then not get replaced because they were saving salary and like the work fall on others. I'd seen it all in my position. And I felt like I had an idea of what that should look like. And the first time I ever met Joe Mackay Sinclair, the founder of the Romans, we hit it off very quickly on these similar ideas. But the problem was I was petrified about running the business because I didn't know anything about like I can't use Excel.
I'm not very good at it, by the way.
Yeah, okay,
I've run a
good.
business for 15 years.
Confession.
So, but let's just take. So it sounds like when you were in Ogilvy, right? You were bringing something, a new role, like a complete different approach to the agency, right? By the time you were there a decade later, had you seen that this sort of different, this kind of the person in the back office is leaving to do what he's doing, that was now playing a central role in how the agency would operate. It'd become much more important, right? And the landscape had changed, yeah?
Yeah.
And you were getting notice.
That was my proudest, the thing I was most proud about was that department, that discipline became the product. That was our differentiator. Like it became the product. Like we sold, when I left, I was the executive strategy and creative director. I was the first person to have that dual role. And I was the only person in PR Ogilvy to have that. So they backed me. I asked them, they backed me. I appreciate that. They always backed me for the most part. And it was David Fox. Foxy was running Ogilvy at that time. He'd been at WPP for 30 years almost. You know, was CEO of Ogilvy Australia. Had been in New York. Had worked in WPP role. Had been in a client lead role in London. Like he was big cheese. Looks exactly like Ange Postecoglou. Apparently, used to get mistaken for him in Sydney, which is kind of funny. But he was a great leader. But he was like a proper agency leader. You know, because he'd been around the world, so he knew the agency game. And I asked him if he would back me on that. And he took a chance. And the president of PR at the time, he's still the president of PR, Ogilvy, Ashraf Shaka, was my partner. And he was good to me. He was good to me too. And they were like, they put their trust in me. And then that became the product. So everything came through us, right? It was the influencer program came through us. The creative product came through us. The production came through us. The storytelling came through us. The training came through us. I was doing all of the training. I was doing all of the speaking, you know, driving the campaigns and driving all the big pitches, you know, massive pitches in Saudi, like the Qatar World Cup and all this stuff. It was great. I was at the heart of it all. But I never had to make the really tough decisions. I was always one layer shy of that. So I think that gave me a unique perspective because I was able to look and be like, this is how I would do it. And sometimes they'd be like, great, let's do it. And it would be right. And sometimes they'd be like, great, let's do it. It'd be wrong. And other times they'd be like, we're not going to do it your way. We're going to do it this way. And that way would be wrong. Sometimes they'd say, we're going to do it our way. And that would be right. So I got to see, you know, all those decisions play out without really it ever really falling on me, you know, which was quite a unique position. So by the time it was time to move and take on an indie by myself, I felt like I'd had the experience that I needed in certain areas.
But let me just, before you took on this job at the Romans, right? Were you ever tempted? Because once you worked out that you were the product, was there like a commercial cap that you had on at some point thinking, hang on a minute, I am the product. Maybe I can run and do something with this on my own, or did that ever cross your mind at all?
No.
Okay.
No, it never did. The reason being was that I always felt my mindset has always been, there's more to do. We get to the end of the year, we get through the award season, and then January rolls around and I'd be like, now what's next, right? There's more that we can do. And the agency world changes so much, so rapidly that there's always a new goal, you know, like you're never finished. And I like that feeling. But I think the reason the reason I never thought about taking anything solo by myself was I didn't back myself. I didn't have the skill set. I was too scared. I didn't have the capital. I didn't have any money. It was weird. I was kind of like in this position of influence and New York knew me, and London knew me, and like Asia and China knew me, and I was traveling around the region, and teams in the region had really good relationships with them, and it's brilliant. But I was still a slave to a salary and the benefits and the protection of WPP. I think it's very hard to shake that when you're raised in that,
Understood.
like my family and we're salary people.
Gotcha.
Right? And if you've not been stuck in that, then maybe you don't understand that. But that is it can be a prison at the same time. It can be as it is the roof over your head, because it protects you, but it can also suppress you a little bit because you don't think, I'm going to take a risk on something here. I'm really lucky that I met Joe, who did take a risk.
And how did you meet Joe?
He called me out of the blue. No idea how I found my name. No idea. And I knew Mother and I knew the Romans. And I knew that the indies were coming for us. I knew that. I backed Ogilvy as different. The truth was, like, all the networks are the same. And there was only so far I could go. And they would say these things, like we see here and here, but there was nowhere for me to go unless it was into the business side. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be in the business side of the big network because I'd worked with those people and I'd seen what they do, and it just wasn't for me. I wanted to work on the craft. But you can only go so far as a craftsperson in a network because it's a big business with a lot of stakeholders and a lot of tight margins and some serious conversations to be had. All the serious conversations were not about the work. That was my biggest pain point. If you want to talk about the work, it was important up until a point. And then it was like, we're not bothered about the work anymore. Like, now it's time to talk with the big boys. And they were mostly men, older men talking business and numbers. And I get it. That's the way it's got to be. But they did not have the passion for the work in what I saw. And so when Joe approached me and he was like, I don't want those people running our business. Our business is about finding the best people and doing the best work in the world. Everything else is secondary or irrelevant. Everything. He's like, that's the only philosophy. And I was like, is that a thing? And at that, like I said, at that time, we were seeing indies take a cut of our cake, right? They were coming in and eating our lunch. And I followed the industry very closely. And I had a feeling that the very best talent were starting to fill a mid layer of indies, right? Where they weren't the household brands. And I think when you're in those household networks, you think that's the pinnacle. You're trained that way, right? You think that's the pinnacle. But then when you go into these indie shops, you realize like this is where the great work is coming from, because these are the people that can't deal with this bullshit. They're sick of it. So you have fantastic creatives, fantastic writers, fantastic thinkers, fantastic strategy people who are sick of the bureaucracy, sick of the red tape, sick of the politics, sick of the proprietary methodologies that come down from New York, come down from London, and just sick of that. And they are there to do great work. And the only job you have is to remove the barriers that are in front of them and just let them go do it. And that was Joe's philosophy. And, he wanted someone with a similar mindset to do it here. And he was like, we'll protect you. So there was a sense of safety. Now, did I think I was the man for the job? No. I was petrified. I had a couple of conversations and I spoke to 2 or 3 people. And my biggest advice always to people is like, just have the conversation. Call your friends, call your old bosses, whatever bridges you haven't burned. Make that call, because just, you never know what someone's going to say. You never know what like tidbit someone's going to give you. And so there were a few people that I spoke to, and my wife, and if enough people tell you to go for it, you kind of feel obligated to give it a shot.
And your gut told you to go for it as well.
I've always been reckless. Yeah, I've always been reckless. So I was saying before we came on, right? Like, it was the worst possible time.
Yeah.
The Romans had no revenue, no clients, and no staff. It didn't exist in the region. My wife had quit 15 years of corporate. She was unsalaried and she was studying to move into the field of holistic health. She was at the bottom. She was 9 months pregnant with our first child. Housing crisis was, housing prices were rising, rental prices were rising. All we had was my Ogilvy salary. And then I quit. 4 days after Hugo was born, I walked into the office. They were like, welcome back. I was like, wait, I need to talk to you. I want to come to you as quickly as I can, and then I'm going to go off and like finish my pat leave. But it's time to go. And I didn't say what I was doing or anything. I wanted to keep it all inside and think about it. And that felt like the biggest risk, because we'd already had the conversation. Like me and my wife have been talking for a year about her quitting, like when's the right moment to pack it in and go and like lean into this full time. And we'd gone through all of that, and she was just as scared as me. She was like a similar upbringing to me, hadn't been around entrepreneurs, had been around people that were self-employed and had struggled. So that was a hangover for her as well. So we were just like, it was kind of like, look, we're on this, we're on this like wild run of making rash decisions. How about another, And that was it. I think, I guess that's the closest you get to the stereotype or like the cliche you hear of like successful business people being like, take the risk,
It's completely in line with just about every story I've told. Exactly, so it's, you went all in, man.
Yeah.
It's, and it's great that you met someone that clearly gave you heaps of freedom. I mean, when we were speaking off air, it's pretty much you've got free reign to run the business as you wish, because they put that trust into you beforehand, right? That must be such a clear-cut reason why you made the decision.
Yeah, because it wasn't like this is my business and this is how I want you to run it and then like report into me. It was, can you build an agency fit for the region in your vision? And I will do what I can from here to help you, whatever that is. And I talked about, like I said, like a lot of people, I think at that time, it was weird when I'd said that I was going to go and lead the Romans here. There were some strange reactions, and there were certain people who were saying like, I don't think that's going to work here. That's an ideas-led agency. It's a provocative agency that deals with quite sensitive social topics, and we're not an ideals market, and we're a very government-led market, and like it's just not, like it's a bad step. And like there was a lot of cynicism towards me. A lot of people that I felt very close to and that I respected, or I felt respected me when I was in Ogilvy, suddenly were like, look, check this guy out. And I tried to use that as fuel, because I knew the reason why the market wasn't like that was because there was a gap on the agency side. I just felt strongly enough that the core idea, if the core idea was right and they believed in me the way I believed in the idea, then we would be successful. I just felt it, and I went to Joe, and it sounds like such a cliche, and I'm sorry, but like he, like in respect to our industry, like he's a bit of a visionary, because he walked away from WPP in a creative position and started something completely from scratch, because he saw that you could build, an independent PR agency that could take down the major creative agencies, not just PR agencies, but the creative agencies, like get briefs that were starting as ad briefs, but would become like earned first creative briefs, because the thinking and the attachment to culture and the ability to tell great stories and diverse, dynamic stories, and to build diverse and dynamic pieces of content, to come up with like experiential ideas and activation ideas. Like PR people can do it all. The clients just don't trust them, because they see them as like very, you do the media and you do the press releases. But if you're thinking about the future of creative, it's not in the ad space. Right? Like it's not on billboards anymore. You're not like picking up an old ad like you did from the 60s that's full of text and it's beautiful imagery, and like those days are gone. And like the future of creative comes from these people that understand influence and celebrity culture, people that understand how to make something work in the street as well as on the TV, as well as on your screen, people that understand that, people that understand culture and humor and language. And like PR people are built for that. They're former journalists, they're former writers, they've been in the C-suite. They don't just have a relationship with the CMO, right? They have to have relationships with the CEO and CFO. They've been in stakeholder meetings, they've done policy, they've done government. They have such a broad understanding of the world and business. And that I think has just met like a need for bold, exciting creativity at the right time. And he captured it and it's shown. And this region isn't there yet, but someone has to try and make the argument. So I said to him and I said to the team downstairs, I was like, my point of view is this: we could build a sustainable PR agency. There are tons here, some of them very good, where we get clients and we do the work day to day and we carry on great. For me, it's not enough. Like, we have to be pushing for something new. And if we get 5 years down the line and we've made 20% progress, and then like maybe in the next 5 years, someone takes off and like takes over and it takes off, great. So long as we've tried every day. So I say to the team, we have a dual strategy. There's your day to day to get clients through the door and get them and do the work and get them to pay you, because got to pay people's salaries and they got to go on holiday and they got to feed their families and stuff like that. But then the other half is always an argument, an experiment, an education, a chance on what tomorrow's needs are. And that's the philosophy in this office. That's how I see it, because even if we fail, it is so much more valuable to everyone in this office to have been in that experiment and have gained that experience than it is just to keep doing things the way they're doing it, because it keeps the bills coming in, So that's why we've tried to build a culture of experimentation. This is very much a lab as much as it is an office. And the fantastic thing about it is we've realized, almost comically so, that clients have been crying out for it. We just didn't know because we weren't asking. So we turn up with this bold, brash, let's do something completely left of field. Let's alter how your brand sees PR and how you see PR and what the results are going to be and what the impact is going to be. Like, let's do it together. Trust us. And they're like, where have you been? That's been the response. So that's been great for us. The challenge now is making it happen, is living up to it, right? That's where we are now. We're now in the midst of, we've got some fantastic clients. We pick and choose our clients very carefully, and we fight for ones we really believe in. And some clients have put their trust in an agency that they don't know, with a young team who obviously all come from craft backgrounds, and you're not going to see any middle-aged like business folks here that don't exist. So they put their trust in us, and we have to go make it happen. And we are, we're challenged every day. Something pops up and it's always for the first time. But so long as we're trying something different and we're driving the agency forward and we're driving the industry forward, and our people forward, like we want people to be the heart of the agency. That's why if you go online, you'll see like we've got juniors down there that have been in the papers talking about equality in the industry, talking about representation in campaigns. Like, this stuff's important for the industry. It was always like a few names in the agency world, right? Like the top ones, and it's like thought leadership or whatever. But the truth is, like, the industry is built for the next gen of talent. Like, they don't have a voice. I always used to say the heartbeat of the creative industry in this part of the world is Filipino. That's the heartbeat, right? Like, how many companies do you go to where like the videographers, the camera people, the editors, the producers are not, like, so many of them are Filipino. Have you ever seen a Filipino on stage in a conference?
Yeah.
I never have. All my designers in journalism are all Filipino. They're phenomenal, and they're nowhere to be seen. So like, it's these small things that no one seems to pick up on. There's misrepresentation. We've got a huge gender disparity in this industry. We're 2/3 women, but 2/3 male leadership. Like, that's a problem. I sit here as a white man in front of an agency, so I get the irony, but like, it's a problem. Like, there are issues, and agencies here in this growth market, they're not bothered about solving them because they just want to grow, right? You know what it's like. The GCC is growth. Like, if you're not spending every day trying to grow, then like, what are you doing? But I just don't see the world that way. And the fantastic thing is, like, my boss doesn't either. So the time and effort on doing the right thing and doing the best work with the best people, He took a chance on that, and the response has been fantastic. Clients loved them, brands loved them, the press loved them. That's the philosophy I had to bring here, not the agency. It's not the agency model. We're not modeled the same. We don't have the same. It's not about values and setup and anything like this. It's completely original. We just had to align on that, you know?
I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, sounds great, right? But it's a business. And you got to pay the bills. You got to bring in money. And we can all talk about how wonderful and creative our product is, right? But ultimately, this guy's trusted you building a business for him, right? You should align on values, but hang on a minute, you got to go and, make some hay, right? So where does, because that's not really your background, is it? You were pitching, you were part of the pitch teams, but you weren't the business guy, right?
Yeah, I can pitch like the best of them. I love the pitch.
Yeah, I can tell, and I know I know you outside this podcast, and I know you present very well, right? But you've got to graft and get a new business in. You've got to convince people to no longer work with these big networks.
Horrible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Horrible. Just give us the business.
I'm assuming you have targets, right? So how has that been? Because that clearly isn't something that perhaps you've thought about before, but it's very integral to your role now.
Yeah. I mean, the great thing about that, so funnily enough, back in my days in Ogilvy, I don't want to keep talking about other businesses, but there was a moment where I'd asked for that training and it didn't come because the rationale was always I was valuable in the position I was in. And I just had to lean into that. When it comes to the business now, there's no option, right? To your point. Now, the first thing you do is you hire really good people around you who can do that stuff. It's the first thing you do. So my strategy from a people perspective was to invest in a couple of senior people that would create a diverse leadership that when you put in front of a client, even if you had no team behind you, they could buy that. They could buy those people. That was the first thing. If I was turning up by myself, no chance. So that was the first thing to do. Then it was to embrace the challenge. Oh, I love that. We were talking about it before, right? I love the academic environment. I love the idea of learning things and growing skills. And there's something really weird about doing that when you're a bit older, because we're in this weird environment, right? This weird generation with this instantaneous gratification where you feel like you should know things instantly. Like if you don't know something, you Google it or you chat GPT it now. No, you just know it. There's the journey of craft and growth is not really as simple as it used to be. And then I took up skydiving like an idiot. For no particular reason whatsoever, for whatever reason, I was compelled to jump out of a plane without someone attached to me. It's just it was just a dream, it was just that one visual. I was let me do that once. And it's really hard. As simple as falling to the ground looks from an outsider's side, it's really hard technically. And there's a lot of learning about it. And so as the weeks went on, in the first few weeks of that, I was really struggling. And I was saying to my wife, I was I can quit. I don't want to go back. It's exhausting. I can't get this stuff right. I keep failing these tests and oh God. And you don't want to fail skydiving too much. It's not the sort of thing you come back from. So, and then eventually you have that moment where you get over the wall, and you crack that one thing and then it's instinctive. Then it's on to the next one. So I was going through that process and I was wow, I forgot how addictive it is to hone and grow a new skill, to acquire new skills. And so that was the mindset I took into the Romans. I was right, let's learn this stuff. I'd love to be Harvey Specter. Do you know what I mean? I'd love to walk in a room and be bish, bash, bosh, get out of here. That's the decision. I'm never going to be that guy, right? I'm never going to be that guy. But can you be good enough if you can get the other stuff right? That was my mindset. You don't need, I was surrounded by people that were obsessed with business. They made it out that they were geniuses in business. And I just don't think that's right. Maybe that's wrong, but I didn't agree. I just think you got enough good people around you to get the numbers right. And then just focus on the things that matter. So that's the first part of it, right? Is just try and get by and hire good people that can teach you and, work your way through it. And I did a lot of reading. And like I said, when I quit, when I handed in my resignation, Hugo had just been born. My firstborn had just been born. So I had 3 months of gardening leave, but no one was looking at me. I was spending all that time building the agency. Maybe I shouldn't admit that on camera. I was doing my client work as well, but by and large, they weren't talking to me. They were he's gone. So I was great. So I was spending all this time reading up and figuring out what I was going to do. And I was reading like biographies of like the great agency leaders, and I was watching documentaries. Like it was amazing. I was going through all this journey, and trying to gain like enough skills to be able to launch with something. But what really helped was I had friends. I had friends who were really good. So I'd pick up the phone to like Mac Brody, the CEO of MSL, right, and publicist, and we worked at Ogilvy together, and we're good friends. I pick up the phone to him, and he's really like sharp. He's a savvy guy. He ran our business in Qatar for years. And I pick up the phone to him and be like, "These are my fees. Are they right?" And he'd be like, "They look right." And I'd be like, "Then they're right." So you just need like someone to just reinforce that, right? So it was like little bits and pieces like that. I leaned on people occasionally, and that was the way to do it. And then Jacqueline started. She's my partner here. We spent months trying to find her the right person for this role, which was going to be someone that could bring a maturity to like the contracts and the business, like that stuff, right? Like manage the senior clients and the procurement. And I'm making it sound like it's not a sexy job. Like there's way more to it, but she's just so good at that. You know, she's so good at that. So for me, I felt part of the job was finding the right person there. For me, that's the achievement in my life, right? And then she goes on and helps us in those areas, and then she teaches me these things, right? And that's cool. And then, you know, I brought my senior strategist from Ogilvy, the only person I brought from Ogilvy, and so now she's learning a new job, and Jacqueline's learning a new job, and I'm learning a new job, and this just became like a theme. So we all kind of like leaned on each other the whole time. And, you know, we supported one another, and we're like, we're going to go in this room and we're going to be no ego. Like we know what the vision is. We know the work is good. We know we've got the experience. Like we've got enough for them to give us a chance. If they believe in the work, the rest of it will work itself out. It will work itself out. If they believe in the work and we know the value of the work, we'll get through. And yeah, we laughed about it, right? There was a huge period of just like cold calling people to death, and I hated it. "Hi, this is Joe. I run the Romans. We're an independent PR." Like, how many of those have you read and just been like, "See it?" So I was doing that, and I was harassing like all the top brands, like all the brands I wanted to work with. "Oh, I love this campaign you did. Have you seen our campaign?" Like all of that. And then all of a sudden, like someone calls you back. "Yeah, I'd love a coffee." "I've got to go. Let's go and have a coffee. Go and meet someone for a coffee." And you know the funniest thing? Everyone that met me, none of them were prepared to give me any work, but everyone that met me gave me insight on what they're unhappy about with their agencies.
I think I saw you mid coffee with someone in Tom and Serge with.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you
doing
did.
exactly this.
That led to my first client win.
There you go.
Not that client, but that led to my first client win. Yeah. And they just dish, not in a bad way. Like, sorry to tell you this, agencies, but like, they just dish. Like, if you ask the right questions, they dish. I wasn't like, "What do you hate about your agency?" I'd never do that. They just tell you. So what you do is the next meeting I went into, they'd be like, "You know, one of the things we're struggling with is," and I'd be like, "X, Y, and Z." And they'd be like, "Yeah, but also this." And I'd be like, "Interesting." And on the third meeting, I'd be like, "You're struggling with X, Y, and Z and this." And they'd be like, "Yeah, really." And so we basically built our pitch as like the anti-agency. We'd go into a pitch and we'd be like, "We know that you're struggling with all of this, with this." And they'd be like, "Oh, fantastic." And that's how we made it work. So that whole period of just like, think of a more PC version of like whoring ourselves out, eventually was like just a massive research task. You know, like we got into a room and we knew what the challenges were. And the great thing was we'd built, it reinforced the fact that we'd built the agency around that, because they were frustrations that I had, and they were frustrations that Jackie had, and they were frustrations that Cassandra had had, they were frustrations that Joe had, and the team in London had had, and that's what it was. That's kind of what the foundation was. It was like, if something is broke, like go fix it, you know, like go make something better. Like that's how I love to see the world as well. Like if I was I was a product and project guy, like I could never work on a project for too long. I'd pick something up, like give it to you and be like, "Cool, I'm going to do another one now." And so that's kind of how we saw the agency. So all those meetings, we had targets, we had plans. Joe's phenomenally like casual about it with me. He was like, "Just get some revenue." We didn't turn up on day one and be like, "Here's the target for H1." Like, what was the point? We didn't have any revenue. We didn't have any clients. We didn't have any people. We didn't have any. We didn't have anything. So like it wouldn't have been worth that. It was like, let's just try this. So just try, see what comes. And so we were able to do that. And that was brilliant for me because it took a lot of the pressure off. And obviously when you get to month 3 and month 4 and you've not won a single client, you've pitched some and you've come close and they're like, yeah, and then no, like, you know what clients are like here, like super flaky. And like, you think you've got a pitch and then it disappears and then you think you've won and then they don't sign for whatever reason. You're like, oh, it's like the emotions are like, it's like a roller coaster. And then that first person calls you and they're like, we're going to take a chance on you. I remember that phone call. It was like 8:45 in the morning, the day after a pitch. This phone call, I was in the elevator and I was like, we're going to take a chance on you. Man, did I cry? I cried my eyes out. And I'd won Global Expo, right? And Qatar Foundation and like all these massive, massive campaigns. But this one was everything because it was us, you know? Like I'd walked into that room, there were 3 of us who walked into that room without a team, without a clue, without $1 of revenue. And we pitched this vision the way we felt it should be done, with no methodology and no like trademarked slide models and like junk. We just like, this is the vision. These are the people. This is what we think we should do. And they were like, let's go. And man, that blew me away. I loved it. And so, and that got the ball rolling, you know, that built the confidence. And so now it's year 2. It's like, now we've got targets.
Yeah.
Like now it's tricky. Like now I got to keep checking Excels and stuff, but like you pick it up.
Oh man, there's so much value in there for people that are starting out. Honestly, like, you know, first of all, building a team around you, hiring people that were better than you in certain skills.
Oh, yeah.
That whole delegation piece, that's just gold.
yeah.
What you said there, absolute gold. Because the problem a lot of people do, and it's what I did at the beginning of my business as well, is a lot of people bottleneck their businesses by putting it all on themselves, right?
100%.
And you
100%.
were smart enough to know that you weren't going to do that you were going to bring people in around you. And that's
Smart enough to know I wasn't smart enough. That's the trick.
Honestly,
that is the trick. That is the
heaps
trick.
of value there. And look, you put the work in, you got the leads, but you went and met people. The networking, this is something I explain to people all the time in coaching. What people tell you and what you absorbed and what you took from that is you could then use,
I said this to the team. I learned more about the UAE in the first 6 months of the Romans than I did at 10 years early, because I was up in that desk in that tower for 10 years straight. And for the first 6 months of the Romans, we went everywhere we met everywhere. We worked in cafes, we worked in hotels, we met all these different people. Now we knew where people were hanging out. We knew how they dressed. We knew what they were listening to. We knew what events they were going to because we were on the ground. So that is such a valuable point.
Yeah.
That taught us everything, because you can't, if you're an agency, you have to, your job, your obligation is to create work that reflects and represents the people in the geographies that you work in. And you can't do that if you're a big network sitting in an ivory tower. How the hell do you know? You don't know what's going on. So we went out and we looked around and we saw the people and we saw the brands and we met the founders and we met the comms leads and we met the marketing people and we met the startups and we met the journalists and we met the influencers and we went to that co-working space and that co-working space and that co-working space and we went to that cafe and that cafe and that gallery and that gallery. And suddenly you know what this place is and how it works and what it needs. So then when a client comes to you who's stuck in an office all day, which they are, having to do the work and run a business, and they say, like, how do we get through to people? We're like, X, Y, and Z. That's it. And they're like, bam. And that's what an agency is for, right? It's to poke your head outside of the cloud of the business, take an assessment, convert that into something conceptually awesome, and make it work for your client. And that's the job. And it's a ton of fun.
That piece, I think loads of people are going to take something from. So thank you very much for sharing that. And I want to ask you one more question as well, because before we wrap it, because there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be perhaps have a similar situation, just or want to grow or want to run a business, and they have the opportunity to do it for someone else or in partnership with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give them? Because you had a brilliant, sounds like Joe, you have a meeting of minds there.
Yeah.
Which kind of led you down that path. But what advice would you give to other people who are looking for that opportunity within their business, or perhaps might look to take on an indie? I'd really like to know your thoughts on that.
Let me think about it. I think I'm very aware that a lot of people, tell you what, a lot of people say, this like hustle culture that you see on social media and stuff. But a lot of people say like, if you get your head down and you work hard, like it doesn't really get you anywhere. That's a bit of a fallacy. I can't agree with that because in my experience, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but in my experience, I felt like that's always been my way. My way has never been to like I can walk into a room and ask for a salary increase. I was never that guy. Could not do it. Couldn't like barge a door down and make demands. My whole way was show, don't tell. Get my head down and do the work and hold it up and be like, what do you think? And the more I did that and the more I honed my craft, the more people would look at it. And then they suddenly started saying, like, that's the standard. And that's where my spirit and confidence has always come from. Someone looking at something I've done and been like, it's good. That's all I needed. And I feel like the more I did that, the opportunities showed themselves. You know, we're expats, right? Like my wife's always asking, like, where are we going to go next? Like, where are we going to move? And I hate that question. It's a similar thing. I believe that the opportunities show themselves. I think the critical thing is to recognize the opportunity when it shows itself, because it's not always obvious, right? It was the same for me moving out to the Middle East. You know, it was like all these things. Like if I look back on my short life today, it's been opportunities that have shown themselves and whether I recognize them or not. And then get several opinions. People you don't believe in, the idiots, like whatever, just get opinions. You know, like people just give you so much funny insight. Recognize the opportunity, get an opinion, and just back yourself. I'd love to say something more philosophical, something more original, but just back yourself. No one's gonna, you know? Sammy said that to me. He was like, no one cares about your career more than you. He was like, no one cares. He's like, I can say I care. And like, if we're talking about your salary increase or whatever, you know, back in the old days, he's like, yeah, I'll get to it. He's like, but like, you have to push, right? No one cares about your career, just you. So I think back yourself, you know, back yourself. Like that's what one of my friends and peers said to me when I wasn't quite sure. We went to have a drink and he and I had never worked together. We'd had similar careers, but we'd never worked directly together. And I was telling him, I was like, so he didn't know what I was like in an office, whatever. And he said something really interesting to me. He was like, you can't really fail. He was like, you can't really fail. And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, well, if I fail, I've failed. He's like, you can't really fail. He's like, you got 10 years of WPP under your belt. Like this market in some iteration will like need a version of you. So like, why not? Like go for it. And his mindset was like, I've stopped like trying to chase titles and positions. Now what I do is I chase the experience. That's how I make my decisions. I chase the experience. And I really valued that point of view because a lot of people are like, you know, you got to jump up and jump up and jump up. And this is a market, right? Where like people do move quickly. And I think to some degree, it can be very misguided. I've seen a lot of people like top out of their skill level very early because the next step for them is this, and they're nowhere near ready for this, but someone's accelerated them through this. And I'm humble enough to know that like, take your time and learn properly. I'd rather be in a job where I can do it really well than like find myself here and not have a clue. But he was like, I've stopped. I don't do that. He's like, I'm in it for the experience. Like if there's a tough job in another market, like, but it's going to be a good experience, I'll take it. Because if I fail or whatever, like I'll find my way. So that was his point of view. I didn't completely follow it because, you know, I had a family to look after and, you know, we're a salary, you know, we're a hand to mouth family. So I had to think about it, but it was just the way he said that. And I thought the experience, that's what I wanted. I wanted the experience. I wasn't worried about the title. I wasn't worried about the salary jump. I was like, that stuff has never interested me. I've lived with money. I've lived without it. I've never been motivated by it. I don't care for flashy things. You can see, I hope. I just wanted the experience. And when I thought about it that way, there was no doubt, right? There was no doubt. So I think if you're in that position, most people probably tell you the opposite of this, but like try to like put the financial opportunity and try and put, you know, those opportunities just to one side for a second. Just ask yourself, like, is the experience something I'm craving? Is it something I can take with me? Is it going to be like a good chapter in my memoir? Like that. That's always been my thing, because I wasn't surrounded by people with fantastic advice, so it had to be my gut, rightly or wrongly. So that's always been my approach. Who knows, man? As well, who knows?
Is this going to be a good chapter in my memoir? That's something I think about a lot as well. So I think that's sound advice. Sound advice. Joe, thank you very much for being a guest on Beyond the Business Club podcast.
Pleasure, my friend.
I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode and look forward to seeing you next time.